Hello. Let me start by saying that I don't own a pair of slacks. The last pair of slacks I owned was a little over 20 years ago, and that was for my Army dress greens. With the subject at hand, I felt it more appropriate that I would do a business casual in my kilt and a vest. Um, the topic I chose was this resurgence and renaissance that we're seeing in our personal cultures. Um, I'm seeing this as people are watching TV. They're seeing movies, Gangs of New York, 1883, Outlander, uh, Braveheart. They see all these different lifestyles, these different heritages and cultures, and they want to be a part of something. People instinctively, deep down inside, they want to be a part of something, and I think that's great. And some people, they want to just jump in without knowing what they are or who, and that's fine too. I still think that people need to do their research. But television has kind of been the big influence for most people. Years ago, there was a show, Sons of Anarchy, that if it weren't for Sons of Anarchy, there wouldn't be half of the bikes out on the road right now. If it weren't for Yellowstone, there wouldn't be so many people buying cowboy hats right now. So I'm a firm believer that television has made this super difficult. DNA testing has also made this something totally difficult. Uh, I got given a DNA test years ago. I didn't need a DNA test. Huff, Hughes, and O'Neill are all three Irish. I knew that. And if you couldn't see the red that's in my beard, and then with the last name of McLeod, I'm pretty much guaranteed I'm Scottish. So I I have done so much research on this topic, on my personal history, my personal heritage, my personal culture. It started when I was young, when I was probably in sixth grade or so. We used to do country reports. My grandmother was first generation born in North America, and she was so proud when I would come home and I'd tell her, "Hey, I'm doing a country report on Scotland, or I'm doing a country report on Ireland." Um, she got so excited, and she would jump in and help me to no end. She would make sure that I was wearing the Feli properly, and that I had my sporran on properly, and that I was wearing everything properly. Um, I want to explain something else right quick, and that's the fact that I'm going to use the terms Highland, Celtic, Gaelic, and Scottish interchangeably. I might use there's synonyms in this sense. Um, Other things that got me started, though, what really piqued my interest growing up, not just my name, the name had a lot to do with it because I wanted to know exactly where we came from and what our history was. But growing up, my dad had the family crest framed, and it was up on the wall, and I saw the bull's head and I saw the motto "Hold fast," and I wanted to know what each of those things meant. And so I did that research, and I found that out that the bull's head was because the bull is supposed to be that unstoppable force for a human, and supposedly the first McLeod chieftain stopped a bull with his bare hands, and he defeated this bull. Hold fast was you don't give up any ground, and you don't let anyone push you back. Uh, the culture and the art and the land has changed so much over time of Scotland. It changed as much as the history did. Um, Mostly with the invaders. It started out with the ancient Irish people coming into Scotland. That's where the language came over. Uh, so you'll Irish language is called Gaelic. The Scottish language is called Gaelic. Those invaders came in and gave that language to the Picts. Then you had the Romans that came in. The Romans got so tired of trying to fight and defeat the Scottish, they just built the wall and said, I'm sorry, I'm out. To hell with this. We're done. They backed out when they finally got pushed out by the Brits. Then the Norse came in. And the Norse is where my family started. The Norse settled with what Scottish people were there. The Picts, by that point, started becoming civilized, I guess. And they started intermingling, and that's where my family comes from. And then finally, the last were the English. And then the English, and then the English, and then the English. But the MacLeods have got such a rich history in Scotland that doing the research for Scotland, I learned about the MacLeods, and doing the research about the MacLeods, I learned about Scotland. I learned so much about how the MacLeods were in charge of the Hebrides Islands for the King of Scotland, and how they would fight over those islands against the MacDonalds and the Mackenzies, and then they would fight. Their allies were the McLeans and the McKays, and ironically, now I'm really good friends with a girl from Michigan whose last name is McKay, and a really good friend of mine is like a brother to me, is down in Corpus. His last name is McLean. So, guess it carries on. There's so many legends from the fairy flag down to the brass button. And then for those of you 80s and 90s kids, the Highlander franchise, which is coming back. Henry Cavill will be playing the Highlander, so get ready, because that's probably one of the best swordsmen I could pick to play Connor MacLeod. Some of the traditions that carry on today are Burns Night, where they pay homage to the poet Robert Burns. Hogmanay, which here in the States we call it New Year's Eve. Auld Lang Syne, which in Old English is Old Long Since, or today's translation is Old Time's Sake or Old Time's Forgotten. The Highland Games, we've actually picked up here in the States and in Canada and started playing the Highland Games and really getting involved into it. So I've actually wanted to compete myself. I've been down since my neck surgery for about a year and a half now. Once I get back in, I don't think I'm going to be in the caber toss, but as big as I am, I'm pretty sure I could throw a hammer or maybe a shot put. But tartans, the kilt and the tartans, and they almost lost that. The Gaelic language, they almost lost these things. And this is one reason why I really kind of pushed this subject right here. This is something I am very passionate about, and it was hard to keep within that 7-minute time frame. But they almost lost who they were, their clothing style, and their language, because they refused to bend at the knee. And maybe that's where I get my attitude from. The Jacobite uprising was to put the Scottish king back on the throne in England, which is who should have been on the throne. But they didn't. The English people didn't want him there, and they wanted to bring in the German prince. And so it started another rebellion. They got beat, and in 1746, the English passed a law called the Dress Act of 1746. And it prohibited men and boys from wearing the kilt, carrying a derrick, which is the big long knife that all the Highlanders would carry, and it prohibited them from speaking Gaelic. Unless they were what they called gentries, which is of noble birth, or they were serving members in the British military. Honestly, that wasn't near as bad as what was to happen if you got caught wearing the kilt outside of regulations. If you got caught you were punished by 6 months imprisonment. If you got caught on your second offense, they sent you to a plantation in the Americas, or they sent you to Australia or New Zealand. Australia was a penal colony, and of course we all knew what was going on here in America. So you either got sent here to America to work on the plantation, and right around the corner was the American Revolution, which you probably got put on the front line at that point because there were a lot of people that didn't make it off the plantation. But it got repealed 40 years later. And so they got their kilts back. Then there was a huge decline in the language. They were so afraid that the English were still going to just hassle them about the language that they quit teaching it to their kids. And it got as far down in 2001, it got down to its lowest. It was only spoken in homes. And then in 2005, the Gaelic Language of Scotland Act was passed, and this made Gaelic as equal as English within the borders of Scotland, and began this revival of the Gaelic language. In 2010, Mike Russell, a Scottish politician, went on the floor of the European Union and addressed the EU in Scottish Gaelic. He was the first one to ever do that. In 2011, a census was taken. 57,000 people, a little over 57,000 people in Scotland spoke Scottish Gaelic. And in 2022, a little over 69,000 spoke. So it's been coming up. Programs like Duolingo have been a huge help. But with the Gaelic Language Act of 2005, programs have been instated in schools from preschool all the way up to the collegiate level. And then BBC also started BBC Alba, which Alba in Gaelic, or Alba is Gaelic for Scotland. Then also here in North America, in Canada, in Nova Scotia, there's a community of about 2,000 people that are fluent Scottish Gaelic speakers. They have a week-long festival up there for Scottish Gaelic speakers. But the Highland Games are making a revival. Here in the United States, they've gotten huge. You can't go anywhere. The South is really predominantly a lot of Scottish people from about North Carolina south and then back towards the west. And all across there is a lot of the Highland Games. And then, of course, up in Canada, there's a big number of Scottish people. But also worldwide, Scotland's known for its whiskey. And then some may know this and some may not. I don't know if it's any good or not, but apparently Japan has taken the recipe, and Japanese are well known for taking whatever recipe they can find and making it better. I don't know. They've taken the Scotch recipe. I don't know if it's any better, any worse. I couldn't tell you. It is too expensive for my blood. So, to recap, my main goal is figure out your past, learn it, and pass it on. Because they almost lost their history. The people of Scotland almost lost their history and their language. Don't be the reason for it. Have a good day.